everybody. Welcome again to another episode of the Retro Monster Truck Review. This week, a little something different. We're going to be covering an Inside Monster Jam episode from Steel City. This is basically in the middle of Pittsburgh right here at Three Rivers Stadium. And Matt, I got to tell you, this is an interesting little venue that we got right here.
Oh man, I miss that place so much. Saw a lot of baseball games there as a kid, and of course the two Monster Jam events they had there in 1996 and 1997. The first one was a mud bowl. Big thunderstorm came through between the pit party and the race, and that was a straight line track, thankfully. And the next year they come back and do a big U-turn course inside Three River Stadium.
Oh, yeah, and this is a really cool looking course that we got here. This Inside Monster Jam coverage, though, you don't get to see very much of it, but they still do a very good job basically showing the pit party here for the event, as well as the final round coverage is very, very well done as well. Our event starts off, of course, with Scott Douglas telling us what a great homecoming this is going to be for driver Eric Tack behind the wheel of Bigfoot. Normally, whenever you hear the name Bigfoot, you associate it with St. Louis, Missouri. However, Eric Tack from the Pittsburgh area, he gets to drive at his hometown show, and that's something that they stress on this entire event.
Yeah, Eric's from Butler, PA, about, 25 minutes north of the city, and he still has his home there, and the Bigfoot team even swings through there every now and then if they need to store a truck overnight or something on the way through. So Eric's still involved with the Bigfoot team to this day, helps crew at some events. I get to talk to him in Youngstown sometimes at the Toughest Monster Truck Tour. He's helping out on occasion. So Eric, definitely the hometown hero of this show. And he got to do those Pittsburgh shows a lot. Ran the Civic Arena a number of times as well. That show was always in February. But this is kind of one of the early summer stadium shows that they tried out for US Hot Rod back in 1997.
Yeah, back in 1997 right here with this event. One thing I always really enjoyed about IMJ, even though I'm not as up to date on all of these IMJ episodes, but I love the intro that they play and the way that it ends with that slow motion shot of Monster Patrol flying nose high in the air. You know what's going to happen when it's going to land on that right rear tire, but that slow-mo shot with that almost whimsical noise sounding like a bunch of wind blowing through a canyon as the truck is landing on the right rear. Just love it. I love that intro. They couldn't have planned that any better, I think.
I love that intro too. Inside Monster Jam was aired on ESPN2, which at the time was kind of like the alternative sports channel, at the time in the mid 90s. Not everybody had it. We actually switched to Dish Network from our local cable provider back in 1997 just so we could get ESPN2. And one of the reasons was the NASCAR coverage and Inside Monster Jam. So we were really excited to see this show on TV every week. It was one of my favorite shows growing up. I love the magazine format where you get a little taste of all the different things that are happening at USHRA events.
Yeah, it's almost like one long around the USHRA segment.
Yeah, it is. And we get, every event or every episode, I should say, has its own kind of main event that they're featuring. And then we see all this other stuff, other monster truck racing, quad wars, some Supercross stuff thrown in, some Thunder Nationals, all kinds of different stuff under the banner of USHRA competition. And they kind of, would pick and choose which segments to show each week. Now, this is the last event that they actually filmed for the first season of IMJ was here in Pittsburgh. They also wrapped up filming for the Gravedigger Domination video at this event. So if you have a keen eye, you can kind of see some of the Pittsburgh skyline and shots and some of the Domination segments. So they're doing a lot of TV production here, and this was a really, really big show, even compared to today's standards. I know it's only a 12-truck field, but the ancillary stuff surrounding the show, the amount of sponsors they had for the event and the local media coverage was just huge.
After our intro here, we go into a pit reporter by the name of Jerry Bernardo, who's basically the on-air host for this show. He's really doing his best. Look, I'm a kid from the 90s impression, and honestly, throughout this entire event, he's definitely got, it sounds like a Boston accent for a lot of this. Instead of Gravedigger, it's Gravedigger.
Yeah, Jerry was an interesting host. I personally thought he fit the role very, very well, given the format of the show and the channel that it was on. ESPN2 was kind of all about that attitude during this period and kind of being, not to sound like an old guy, but kind of being like, the hip thing And Jerry was that. He was that mid-90s, Northeastern accent. I'm not sure if it's New York or Boston, but it's he definitely had the attitude. He'd throw a
Oh,
little
he
comedy in
definitely
there.
did.
He had the swagger.
Anything that ended with ER, Carolina Crusher, or Grave Digger.
Yeah, and he had the attitude and the presence and the swagger to get the job done in terms of what they set out to do with this. And the Supercross was a little bit similar in terms of the way they had it set up with their pit reporters were industry people and kind of had that little attitude and that racing culture, SoCal, thing kind of going on too. Whereas Jerry came in for the Inside Monster Jam side, and he did a lot of different broadcasting over the years. I saw him do the Running of the Bulls one year in Barcelona. They had him going all over the place as a correspondent for various TV shows back then.
Absolutely. He actually leads us in here to some highlights. We get G-Force hitting a jump with that giant jet engine in the back firing out. That's one cool truck, by the way, from Alantura. Always love the flame shooting out the back. Digger number 12 starting a racing pass. We get a clip of American Guardians flags, Little Tiger and Survivor both flying over the cars. And Jerry kind of comes back in and he says, Steel City tonight. And then we get Dennis Anderson, the man right here. He says, we're here, man. We're in the heat right now. We're going to have the dirt, the rocks, and the dust flying tonight. And then we cut immediately over from Gravedigger to Tom Mintz. And Jerry says, what about Dennis? And in classic Tom Mintz fashion, he just answers and says, Dennis who?
Yeah, and not to mention that Tom Mintz is standing in that heat in an all-black fire suit signing autographs during the pit party. I mean, it's crazy. I don't know how he was able to handle it. I was young. I was only 7 years old when this event happened. I was there, but I don't particularly remember the heat being, as big of a factor as they make it out on TV. But I was young and full of energy and, was able to stay up at least through the whole show. And this was a long show. There was a lot going on, but I was showing, the pit party segments here, and we'll get into a little bit of that later on, give you some of the information about that. But yeah, Tom always ready to cut up when they mention Dennis.
Jerry at the end of that little thing there he has to reiterate that this is a joke. He says he's talking about Gravedigger, and he said, Dennis who? I love the spirit. We get it, Jerry. It's a joke. He made it funny. Moving on, though. Liquidator, Carolina Crusher, Bigfoot, and Survivor clips before we go into Jerry talking to hometown hero here, Eric Tack. Tight track, hard packed dirt. What do you think? And Eric Tack says it's pretty good. It's going to make for an interesting track down into the corner. You're going to see a lot of trucks going hard into that corner and coming out hard. It'll be good for racing. We cut over to a clip of Mr. Mintz as they introduce him here. It's Tom Mintz's father, Bill. Somebody that we really rarely ever saw a clip of back in the day, but here we get a nice little interview with him. And Bill says she's ready after last weekend. We beat her pretty hard, but she held up pretty good, and it's looking pretty good for this weekend's event.
Yeah, they beat her up pretty hard last weekend because the weekend prior was the Charlotte Truck Fest, and that would go on to be the last two episodes of the IMJ season, but it was the weekend prior to Pittsburgh, so the 3-day marathon shot of races that they did down there in Charlotte at the first U.S. Truck Fest, they definitely did push the truck hard. Tom Mintz taken the IMJ championship there in the invitational class, and man, it's good to see the truck still looking good here coming into Pittsburgh.
Scott Douglas pops back up here and he says, despite sweltering temperatures well into the 90s, the pit party was a huge success. The scene of a bygone era in sports, but alive in Monster Jam when drivers make themselves available for autographs and pictures. Douglas narrates over some clips of the pit party here, and what I like is that it kind of fades into some almost World War II type serial music, and it turns everything into black and white, and it almost looks like this should be airing before a movie in the 1940s for a moment there, as you see all these people running around in this pit party. It definitely looks hot from everything that you can see out there. It looks like the sun is just beating down on all of these guys.
Yeah, June 21st, 1997, late June in Pittsburgh. I mean, we're in the north here, but it still gets really hot, and the humidity during this time of the year is really, really bad, and that's what really kills everybody up here. And this pit party was so far before the show. Nowadays they try to butt maybe a half-hour break in between the pit party and the show. This pit party ran from 3 to 5:30 p.m. and then showtime wasn't until 7:30. So a big break in between there. And I can remember at the end of the pit party, they take everybody kind of over, and they kind of ushered everyone toward the main tunnel for the stadium and the roadway that led to it. And they paraded all the trucks down the street and down the access road to that tunnel. And it was just so cool to see those trucks that close running, just right in front of you as a little kid. It was amazing. You never got to get that close to trucks running generally back then. And it was the coolest thing. I remember Dennis blipping the throttle and pulling the front wheels up on the pavement just a little bit. That's just one of the many memories I have from that day. But the pit party, again, it's not as popular as they are now. You kind of see the shots. There's people there, but they're not lined up, an hour deep for Dennis or Tom's autograph. It was pretty much walk right up and talk to everybody, which was really cool.
Yeah, and that's something that I've always enjoyed about the pit party atmosphere, just walking around on the floor, getting to see the trucks up close and personal. And every now and then you happen to run into drivers that don't really have a line. You can kind of lean up against them and talk to them for a little while, learn a little bit more about their trucks. That's one thing I've always enjoyed about pit parties. That, and to me, honestly, the pit party isn't really about going in and talking to drivers or even looking at some of the trucks. To me, it was always, hey, who's going to be there? Let's meet up. We'll meet up in the center of the floor, and by the end of it, you've got maybe 8 or 10 monster truck fans in a giant circle just sitting there talking about how their lives are going, as well as just monster trucks in general.
I'm the same way now. More of the time at pit parties, I end up finding people I know and talking to them, just like you said. It's it's such a cool environment to be there in that kind of setup with all the trucks, all the drivers, all those people running around. And some of the pit parties get pretty crazy nowadays, and it's hard to get all the autographs if that's what you're there to do. And I kind of enjoy just kind of sitting back now as more of an experienced fan, we'll call it, and
Yeah.
just kind of taking it all in.
Yeah, that's kind of what I do now as well. I mean, for those that don't know, monster trucks used to have autograph sessions in the pit party before the show. Then at the end of the show, after everything was over with, guys would be out there until almost 2, 3 in the morning, sometimes signing autographs just to make sure they got everybody. Not the case anymore these days. I'm kind of glad they did away with that uh, after show autograph session for the reason of, my God, how long are we going to be here kind of thing. But one thing that I really like here is after they come out of the pit party, who is the first guy that we get to see? Joe Lowe. Says tonight the Monsters are going to be running on a U course, he says, while I'm pretty sure and very convinced that he might have borrowed the sunglasses that he's wearing from Dale Earnhardt. They're these big mirror sunglasses. They look fantastic. And I love the fact that we get to see Joe Lowe in his classic getup.
It's the greatest. And we get to see Joe in the not quite as often used short sleeve version of the American flag shirt. And I remember that they always had that hard camera. Well, not a hard camera. It was the moving camera on the floor would go to Joe, and they would show this shot like what we're seeing here up on the Jumbotron in the stadium. So we had, the live video with replays going in the stadium, which we weren't used to at the time in Pittsburgh. The Civic Arena didn't really have a full video scoreboard at this time, and they weren't using all those abilities. So to go to the stadium there on the North Shore and see video replays of runs and seeing drivers being interviewed up close, it was like the coolest thing as a kid who had never gotten to see that thing before. I'm like, this is the big time. And they had mentioned that this show was being recorded for TV and when it would air. A pretty quick turnaround for production. The event's on June 21st and air date July 22nd. So all this stadium feed footage, a lot of it ends up getting used in the TV show here.
Yeah, a lot of the things that you actually saw while you were there at the show ends up on TV for everybody else to see as well. Scott Douglas picks up here. He says, legendary monster truck announcer, on-track announcer Joe Lowe kicked off the 10-truck Steel City Monster Jam. The loudest applause, of course, was saved for who else? Dennis Anderson and the Gravedigger. The thermostat was still pegged in the upper 80s by race time as Brian Barthel and the Little Tiger broke the track in with a smooth qualifying run. Tom Mintz didn't fare as well as he blew the shocks out on his Chevy, and they had to scramble to get the truck ready for freestyle. In front of his hometown fans, Eric Tack and Bigfoot was able to launch Bigfoot into next round. And Dennis Anderson Gravedigger looked solid in the early going, but after his round one victory of beating American Guardian, he blew the transmission. So that was it for Dennis pretty much on this night, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was. And, they say it's a 10-truck field, but really there's 12 trucks. We've got Bigfoot 11 here with Eric Tack. We've got Gravedigger number 12 with Dennis Anderson, Monster Patrol with Tom Mentz, Carolina Crusher with Gary Porter, Charlie Pauken and Excalibur, Little Tiger with Brian Bartle, Liquidator and Bob Fisher, Nightmare 2 with Gary Bauer, Survivor with Chuck Jordan, Wild Thing and Tony Farrell, G-Force with Alan Tura, and Joe Bagdonis in the American Guardian. So we really had 12 trucks there, and they all did compete that night. So I'm not sure if maybe only the top 10 trucks made it to round one or something, perhaps, but they did do single truck qualifying. And then we went ahead into the first round of brackets. And I can remember being so bummed out when Dennis had to come out to the crowd and make the announcement that he wasn't going to be back. And I remember them showing that run on the replay up on the Jumbotron of this real zoomed in coming out of the corner. The truck kind of diffs out and then gets going again. And whatever transmission issue they had, they must not have had a spare in the truck, because I think they had blown some stuff up in Charlotte the week prior. I don't know, maybe they didn't have enough parts to build another one in the meantime, but it was sure a bummer to see the Digger go out early because he was running really well that night.
Jerry actually talks to Dennis right here. He says, "You're here for the fans. You're here for the win. You're the grave digger. You got to pull off because you've got a broken truck." And then it says, "It's tough, man. It's real disappointing. We work hard. We drove all night to get here. And then you come here. Well, then we come here and we fall on our face. It's like I'm the dude standing here with the black eye. The fans are disappointed, and I am too." And Scott Douglas picks right up from there. We kind of go from a downer to an upper. Here is Gary Porter's first time racing at Three Rivers Stadium was a good one. He continued a very strong season by defeating Liquidator in the early round action. And the next race, he was overpowered by Eric Tack's experience on the Dusty U-turn. He would advance to the semifinals, though, as a fast loser, where he would meet with Little Tiger. This time, Porter found the racing line that he needed, and he kept the truck straight on his way to the final round. Charlie Pauken and Excalibur may be used to the concrete of the Thunder National Series, but when he gets out here on the dirt, he made it all the way to the semifinals against Bigfoot. Pauken had some trouble in the loose dirt, though, and allowed the Big Blue Ford to take it safely to the final round. So your semifinal round is Little Tiger and Carolina Crusher and Bigfoot and Excalibur. To me, the heavyweight side of that matchup is Bigfoot and Excalibur. But honestly, just looking at this lineup, I would have picked a completely different Final Four for this show.
Yeah, just looking at the lineup, but as we know, things happen. Tom goes out in qualifying with the shock issue and can't compete. Dennis goes out after round one over the easy win, but he can't come back. So it kind of left, at least one half of the bracket wide open, I'd guess, for, somebody to step up and try to go out and take the win. And we get to see that round two race between Bigfoot and Carolina Crusher. And that's probably the closest race of the night to that point. A good close race. I remember sitting in the stands, and my mom was a big Carolina Crusher fan, of course, and I remember screaming, "Bigfoot's going to win," as loud as I could at her when they were going to go up in that round two matchup.
Yeah, that was a pretty close race here. Honestly, you could have thrown Pauken into the semifinals. Just like I said, looking at the lineup, you would almost expect it to be Bigfoot, Digger, Crusher, and Monster Patrol. But Charlie Pauken could sneak his way into anything. Little Tiger, to me, is a giant surprise to see in the semifinals. But with the breakage and everything that was going on, somebody had to take advantage of it, and it just happened to be Brian Bartle.
Yeah, I'm not sure who Brian beat prior to get into that semifinal run. We don't really get an indication here on the TV show, but I'm sure he must have been running fairly smooth. And the truck itself, that early Patrick design, the former Magnum Force truck, was a solid competitor back then. It could always put on a good show. It was nice and consistent, and Brian made his name in that truck.
That he did. We get out of this segment. We're only 5 minutes into this show, by the way, and we already have the final round set up for what was going to be considered our main event. But we get a what's coming up kind of skit here from Scott Douglas, and this is just a rundown of everything that's featured on an IMJ show, or at least this show. We get Stadium Rough Trucks rumbling in Minneapolis. Tinseltown is anything but that for the Outlaw Quad Wars series. IMJ reporter Adam Murphy is going to have a segment at Race Rock. Thunder Nationals Racing from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and more from Steel City Racing, which is the buggies that they highlight right here. And then the AMA Supercross Finals from Las Vegas. They don't mention the fact that they're also going to go to Nashville and the new Nashville Arena a little bit later, and we're going to get to see a really cool moment from Tony Farrell.
For sure. The magazine format, like we said, jam-packed full of different action, and all of these different events getting featured, different segments, different feature acts, if you will. And then we go to commercial, and we come back with one of the Y108 girls, which was one of the country stations here in Pittsburgh at the time. They were a sponsor of the event, asking Jerry to show me your best monster moment.
And of course, Jerry doesn't show her best monster moment. It's actually Scott Douglas that shows her, as he calls Dodge Express. He calls it Rampage, and then immediately calls it Dodge Express again. But of course, it's the famous rollover from the Pontiac Silverdome in 1993 in front of 40,000 spectators. Deppie has this, or excuse me, Ken Deppie is driving the truck, and he has this end over end rollover that just really hurts the truck. It's one of those hard rollovers from the early days of monster truck racing that you really can never get out of your head.
Yeah, that Pontiac show had a really tricky course in the Division II class, we'll call it, where Bigfoot ends up getting taken out in the finals by Excalibur. But the Dodge Express, one of the other heavyweights in that lineup, goes over those washboard jumps they have there and gets the truck tripped up. The brand new Dodge Ram body all torn up on the Dodge Express. And I always loved the Monster Moment segment of IMJ. It was my favorite segment of the show. Even back as a 7-8-year-old kid, I was into the whole retro thing and how things used to be. So it's probably good that we're doing this podcast now today.
Exactly. We get Joe Lowe saying that Ken Deppie tried to take care of the moguls, but the moguls took care of him. I love Joe Lowe, a live event announcer. He gets a one-liner in right there. And then we cut to Ken Deppie saying that he should have stayed in the power, hoping the front end would come out of that, but it would have brought itself back out. I just saw the video, though. The front wheels were spinning pretty hard, but they weren't touching the dirt, indicating that the chassis had already dug in at that point by the time he got back on the throttle.
Yeah, it's just an unfortunate setup there, and he was trying to kind of skim his way through those jumps, just did not work for him that night. And then we go to Jerry here with a couple fans in the stands, kind of as a little in-between segment to send it to our next racing action.
Yeah, we go to Thunder Nationals coverage, and we got a Mike West sighting right here with the old Jet Quad Kamikaze, which I believe now is owned by Mike Vaughters. Coming out of here onto the track, lighting up the floor in the venue. Mike talks about the quad and in pretty much a pretty good detail here, with the engine being a 1,500 horsepower motor out of an Army helicopter. Mike also believes the top speeds of this thing are pretty well endless, and I tend to believe him just by looking at it.
I've just gotten to see these quads a couple times, and in a small arena, it's absolutely insane that they try to drive these things around because there's so much thrust and so much noise. And they're a real show. I mean, it doesn't look like they're doing much there on the floor, but just to be there in person and feel that reverberate through your chest, it's an amazing, amazing show.
If nobody has ever gotten to be a part of an event with a jet quad there, or even the Shockwave truck or anything jet related, it is something that will take your breath away. Honestly, I can remember just a few years ago, it's not this quad, but it was Shockwave. We was down in, where was that? I'm trying to remember it. It's the Speedway that Map Motorsports has a big event in. I'll remember it before the end of it. But anyway, Shockwave is in the middle of the floor, and it was a cold night. When he fired up that heat, everybody in that place was warm by the end of it. It was an amazing feat to behold. And you get this little quad inside this small arena, you're all going to be warm by the end of the night. Trust me.
Oh yeah, the heat coming off of that, especially when they hit the fire show and they, kind of throw the afterburner on just to bypass the fire through it. It's really, really hot, and you don't expect it, especially even if you're behind like hockey boards or something like that, or behind the glass. The heat goes right through it somehow, and you really, really get to feel the experience of those vehicles when you're there in person.
Oh yeah, you definitely get a hot foot. Overkill going to defeat Hercules in, they say it's a qualifying clip, but I'm not too sure about that because they later say that Hercules is the quick qualifier. Norm Miller and Barefoot knocks out Jeff Cook and Moorwagon. Shout out to Jeff Cook in the International Monster Truck and Museum Hall of Fame. Pauken takes out the fast qualifier Hercules, as they said, which I'm not 100% sure because they just showed Overkill beating Hercules in qualifying, but somehow it's the number one qualifier. I don't know what's going on there, who didn't relay what message there to Scott Douglas. But Overkill takes down Barefoot in the semifinals, and then Excalibur has to go take out Barefoot with relative ease, though, as the truck kind of just glides over the top of the cars in the final round.
Yeah, they used to use the term fast qualifier and fast loser interchangeably back then quite a lot, and I'm not sure why, but the Hercules truck was just the fast loser from that first round. That's what they meant there, and got him back in the bracket. But Pauken kind of taking the reins over things here in Grand Rapids and taking the night one win. And we get to hear him talk a little bit about his strategy and how he approached the show, and we get to see him sign some autographs. And there's a lot of people there at the Van Andel Arena.
Oh yeah, there definitely are. Hawkins said that he felt really good on that night. But what caught me and made me chuckle at the end of it was when Scott Douglas comes out and talks about day number 2, and he says Hawkins' autograph was a hot commodity during the next night's pre-race autograph session when they're all sitting there in a line together. It's like Chucky's just kind of at the end, so he's going to get an autograph to everybody. But I like Douglas pointing out that after his win the night before, Chucky was a hot commodity to the crowd.
You got to set up the stage a little bit. The script writers at least did a pretty good job here for the setup that Scott had to read off of. And what I always thought was cool is it seemed like these Thunder National shows had their own camera crew. I don't know who did it. It's like they kind of recorded stuff and then sent it in because the footage is a little grainier and the audio is a little different. You can tell it's like they kind of had their own little traveling crew with them. I don't know if Aaron Polburn had his own production thing set up there where they could record, but as you see a lot of these other episodes through the IMJ season, they're all kind of done in the same way where there's highlights and then there's like an interview with a driver, and like the interview with Mike West, we kind of saw the same thing where it's set up beforehand. Just looking at the production of it, I found it kind of interesting.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there. One thing I found interesting was it's the day 1 camera is an ISO camera at the very end of the track. So you're seeing the trucks coming head on at you. Day 2, they switch it up. They move it to a side angle. And honestly, I prefer the side angle, but that ISO camera from a Thunder Nationals event is just something really cool because you get to see 2 trucks within maybe, I don't know, 6 feet of each other jumping over these cars almost tire to tire. It's an incredible looking camera shot from that ISO at the end of the track on day 1. Day 2 as well, I really love how up close and personal you almost feel with how low they have that camera angle, even though it is a side angle.
It shows how hard those trucks are running, and Aaron Polburn always got the most out of his talent. A tremendous promoter, a Hall of Famer in his own right, and it's amazing that they could go into these smaller markets and just completely sell the place out, it appears, at these arenas that still have a pretty good capacity to them. With the Thunder National show, they really had a big following in those towns.
That they certainly did. We go right from there and we go into some stadium rough trucks action all the way over in Minneapolis. So we're jumping all the way around from Grand Rapids to Minneapolis. We're mainly in Steel City. Now we're going to go all the way over here to talk about some rough trucks here. And they aren't kidding when they say rough trucks. This is one rough track.
It's rough. And like Huey Lewis said, we're going back in time as well, back to February 22nd, 1997 at the Grand Slam of Motorsports here in the Metrodome. And it is a nasty, nasty setup they got for these trucks.
Yeah, Craig Peterson actually noses in with one of the rough trucks here, and it's a hard nosedive into one of those ramps right there. Virtual reality, they actually say the truck is winning, but it loses the race against Butterfly due to just nosing into a jump and blowing a left front tire. But somehow he ends up still winning the event after 2 other semifinalists break virtually at the exact same time over the same jump.
Yeah, the track's just brutal. These washboard whoops, whatever you want to call them, you could tell they're definitely not optimized for stadium rough trucks action. I don't know if they were doing, some kind of motocross quad wars there too. I'm sure going over that same part of the track, but it really wasn't set up well for the full-size trucks at all.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, those guys were definitely feeling it by the end of the night right there. We go from there, though, and we move into some arena supercross. John McDonnell actually breaks out with a hole shot right here, but spins directly in front of the entire field right after the first corner, slows a lot of guys up.
Oh, that's the way you do it. You get out front and then you just completely yard sail it and block the entire field. At least you're going to make the highlight reel.
Preferably, though, if you do that, preferably you want them to all stay behind you and not just go wide around you like some of these guys do.
Yeah, this is the kind of stadium motocross setup they did as a side act at this El Paso Monster Jam, March 8th, 1997, this time at the Sun Bowl. We go in kind of on a flat track just with some jumps, and we get the winner here, Mark Traversy, who looks like Ryan Newman with a stringy mullet, kind of the one taking the win here.
Yeah, he gets the win, but I found it funny. Scott Douglas says he's trying to hold off a guy named Don Grabels. By the way, he's no relation to Benny.
Yeah. So we finish up here at the Stadium Motocross, and then Jerry kind of transitions us into our Jammer Question of the Week.
Jammer Question of the Week is one that's actually something that we should. I honestly, after speaking with you now after the Orlando 2000 episode, I think we maybe ought to just every time we talk about RIIs, we need to keep going with it. And here's another one for you. Why do the trucks shut off before a race? And veteran um, tech official here, Brian Shernow, shares his answer. Basically says, "Hey, we test the RII before every race. It's a safety feature, and safety is first here in the United States Hot Rod Association."
Yeah, and I think we're going to stay on this campaign of the announcers and everybody need to let the people know what the RII is. As we talked about in the Orlando show and some of the other episodes we've done here, the RII is an important safety feature, and it's good that everybody knows what it does and what it's used for and why the truck shut off. Maybe we could just hot link them to the YouTube video
Yeah,
for this if we need to, but
yeah, we
it's
could definitely
cool.
do that.
We get to see Dennis Anderson part of his qualifying run here from the Three Rivers Stadium show, which is pretty cool too.
Yeah, you get to see a little bit more Gravedigger on the show, and you can't complain about that. One thing I'll say before we move on here about the RII, veteran Gary Porter has always said that that is the single biggest safety innovation to come along in our sport, and it's something that I feel like we should talk about at least once every show.
I can't disagree with you.
Then, as we cut out of this IMJ question of the week here, we get a really calm voice, just a soothing voice. It says, "Hi, I'm Chuck Jordan, driver of Survivor. It's a 1995 Chevrolet running a 540 Rodec motor, turbo 400 transmission, Rockwell 106 axles, blown injected alcohol, and we run 66-inch tall tires." Basically, Chuck Jordan is just doing a rundown of his truck right here. And I got to tell you, he is so soft spoken in this. He could honestly, it's like we walked into inside the actor studio for just a moment.
Yeah, real, kind of little feature piece here on the Survivor truck, going over some of the specs. And I think the next season they would kind of refine that a little bit and give it an intro. And I think they called it a closer look, where they would kind of talk to the driver about their vehicle a little bit. But yeah, we're covering Chuck Jordan's Survivor here, who's at this Pittsburgh show, despite his vehement protests otherwise, saying that he was never there, but all of the information and evidence is to the contrary.
Yeah, there's literally video evidence of your truck at this show. So, hey, guess what? You were there.
He was there. And then we go to Jerry with our man Bud here in the stand showing off the guns as we transition to Vegas Supercross.
Yeah, we go to Vegas Supercross right here. Jerry with Bud. I'm not sure if we ever see Bud again, but it looks like he could really go for one of those "What's up" Budweiser commercials, honestly.
Yeah, he got his 15 seconds of fame anyway, and he said he'd do anything to get on TV, so that's how he used his time. We go to Vegas here, the Vegas Supercross Finals, of course, part of the Pace Motorsports group, and still part of Feld Motorsports at this time today. So May 16th, 1997. An historic year in Supercross because Jeremy McGrath is coming off of 4 straight championships, and Jeff Emig just needs to kind of get a decent finish in order to lock up this year's championship ahead of Jeremy McGrath, who had an off season. Had McGrath won, he would have won 8 in a row without this 97 year breaking up the streak in between, which is just incredible. Emig goes on with a decent finish to go ahead and win the championship. And this is also the first win for a 4-stroke bike in AMA Supercross. Doug Henry riding the prototype experimental Yamaha 4-stroke bike. They say that bike cost $500,000 to build. It was a one-off special idea. They got approval from AMA to run it as a test without having to homologate the bike, which was pretty cool. And they ran it in that Vegas finals, and Doug Henry takes the win. And now, as we know, all Supercross bikes are all 4-stroke. So that's kind of a turning point in the history of the sport.
Yeah, there you go. Turning point in the history of Supercross on an Inside Monster Jam episode for you right there. Honestly, I never would have thought that you would put almost $500,000 into a 4-stroke motorcycle to go race in Supercross, but that's a lot of money right there. After all, that is literally the NASCAR Cup Series of motocross.
It's the spectacle. It's the big deal. And, not all the bikes cost that much back then, but this was a one-off special deal that they were trying out. And I guess they had a fully custom machine billet engine block they made for this thing. Yeah, completely out of control, the amount of risk they took. And I guess from what I was reading, the thing didn't even have an oil drain plug. It was kind of, a very, very specialized engine that they built with some existing parts. And hey, they proved out the concept, and within the AMA rules, they were able to go in and take a win.
Well, there you go. Some history that you learn on inside Monster Jam from AMA Supercross of all things. After the AMA coverage, though, we cut into the new Nashville arena, and we get a really cool intro from Tony Farrell and Wild Thing as he blasts out of a box. Because by God, we're all wrestling fans here as well. If you come out of a box, you're over, according to Jim Cornette, and that's exactly what happens to Tony Farrell right here. He has no problem in his first round matchup against the original monster truck, Bigfoot, with Eric Meager. However, Meager remains a fast loser in this bracket and actually goes on all the way to the final round to meet none other than Tony Farrell.
Yeah, I guess he came back as a fast loser. It looks like they may have only had 6 trucks at this first Nashville show, but boy, it's a heavy hitter lineup with, Wild Thing, Bigfoot with Eric Meager, Tom Menson, Monster Patrol, Pizzo and Predator, and then you've got Gary Porter and Carolina Crusher and Dennis Anderson and Gravedigger. What a star-studded lineup for only a 6-truck show.
Oh, yeah.
Like you said, going into the finals here, the oldest and newest trucks on the USHRA tour, meaning the oldest Bigfoot and the newest Wild Thing. At the time, kind of accurate, but in reality, the Wild Thing truck was older than Bigfoot 15.
Yeah, the Wild Thing's actually older than the truck that it's competing against in the other lane. It's just the name on the side of it happens to date back to the late 70s as far as Bigfoot goes. I got to tell you, though, a Music City blowout is what Scott Douglas. I'm thinking back to one of our previous episodes. Sorry about that, guys. But basically says, hey, Music City blowout. Bigfoot rarely loses 2 in a row. And in this this extended highlight that we have right here, the final is actually shown in fast motion. And it seems like Tony Farrell loses it in the first corner. Truck pushes wide, and he spends the rest of the race trying to catch up.
Yeah, he kind of goes a little wide, a little slow, and then Meager, I'm looking here, he finishes, and then he ends up going over the cars, 2 more times at least, just putting it in for good measure there in the finals at the first show at the new Nashville Arena. And Josh, I don't know if you've been there on tour at all, but
yep, I have actually. It's one of the nicest arenas that I went to last year. It was the first one that I went to last year. I remember walking into that place, and it still looks, honestly, when you look at the highlights from this show, it still looks that nice.
That's what I was going to ask you. It seems like a pretty cool venue, and having been built kind of in a little bit of this newer age of facilities, I'm sure it's got to be a pretty cool place to visit.
Oh yeah, Bridgestone Arena. Like I've said before in private, probably some of the best popcorn I've ever had from inside an arena right there. I'm a bit of a popcorn connoisseur. I enjoy a lot of movie theater style popcorns, and that place right there, I would drive 4 hours just to get Nashville popcorn.
That's impressive. I'm a boom chicka pop guy myself, but I'll take your word for it.
That's good stuff. You ever get to Nashville and you ever get to a Monster Jam there, which they just had a show there, I believe last weekend. If you were there, I hope you enjoyed some of that popcorn that they had. Also, chicken strips. By God, chicken strips as well. They were really good as well.
Chicken strips and popcorn. That sounds like a whole entertainment night right there.
Hey, when you're running back and forth and you're just trying to get something real quick, and they happen to have just chicken strips and French fries laid out, by God, you get that right between your 10-minute break between rounds, and that's some good stuff.
Man, you give me a corn dog and a snow cone on top of it, and I'm set to go.
Well, I ain't got that much time to eat all that. The popcorn you can snack on the rest of the show, but the chicken strips, by God, you got 10 minutes to wolf that down.
So we head from Nashville here. We go into the next segment, which is the Outlaw Quad Wars series, they're calling it. Now, I think they kind of manufactured this a little bit for TV because they're showing them out of order and they're kind of keeping track of points back and forth between Team North and South. This event is from January 25th, 1997 in the LA Coliseum. And you may ask, why aren't they in Anaheim? Well, they were, I think, revamping Anaheim Stadium at this time. So they hopped over to the LA Coliseum for a couple of years and got to put on a couple really interesting shows. This is the Monster Jam show, and the Quad Wars, just for the Quad Wars, they're going up around the peristyles in the LA Coliseum, those famous marble archways at the top of the stands.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, that was a cool sight to see. Is just this, especially in the rain too. By the way, this is a complete washout that they're showing right here, and they're still pushing these quads up that giant hill and trying to get up through those pillars and do that classic circle that they had to do and come back down. That is astonishing and cool at the very same time, and it takes a lot of nuts for somebody behind the wheel of one of those quads to be able to just floor it up that hill.
Oh, for sure. And you can't even tell who's who. The mud is so bad here. You see some of the bikes jumping and just landing in these huge puddles. I guess they say Team South kind of wins the race, and there's kind of a mud fight here at the end. They said that was declared a draw, but Team South takes the overall lead, 600 to 500, and we're going to cover some quad action from Pittsburgh here later in the show as well.
That we will. But right here, we actually cut to a segment that was kind of near and dear to my heart when I watched this, and that's Jerry pitching over to Adam Murphy, who talks about the Race Rock restaurant down there in Florida. Outside, we see Bigfoot 7, and when you walk in, you see Samson just almost ready like it's going to land on you. Actually had a chance to visit this place in my younger years when we went to vacation in Florida. I remember walking into this place and just being in awe and running around everywhere to look at everything. The only thing I can really remember off the top of my head, though, is my stepmother complaining about all the prices of the food while me and my dad were in absolute heaven walking around this motorsports venue. And this is actually where I got my copy of Digger's Nomination from.
Oh, that's pretty cool. The Race Rock setup, unfortunately, I never got to go to one, but kind of a half museum, half restaurant, kind of taken off of the Hard Rock Cafe, Planet Hollywood vibe that was going on there in the 90s, where these theme restaurants were really, really big. And I'm sure that the burger and fries wasn't a cheap option just because of all the equipment they had in there that they had to probably insure, and all this stuff that just, it had to be an expensive operation.
Oh, it was an expensive operation. And I do remember it being very pricey. And we were only allowed to get a cheeseburger and fries, according to our parents, because of how expensive the menu was. But I just remember walking around that place and being in absolute awe. This thing was not just NASCAR and monster trucks or IndyCar or anything like that. It was NASCAR, monster trucks, IndyCar, swamp buggies, Supercross. You name a style of racing, it was probably featured somewhere in there.
Yeah, any kind of motorsports. We got street bikes, we've got the MotoGP, we've got drag race cars, the Indy cars hanging from the ceiling, the swamp buggy up there at the entrance, and you've got the store there as well. You mentioned you got Domination. I know some people had said they got the Diamond P videos too, so it wasn't like promoter exclusive or anything. They just had all kinds of motorsports stuff there.
Yeah, and it was a great place to be. For those that don't know, Bigfoot 7 actually was auctioned off from Race Rock. It's now down there in Florida somewhere. Some amusement park has renamed it Big Feet number 7. So if you ever get a chance to see it, it's out there.
Yeah, down at Fun Spot in
Fun
Kissimmee.
spot. I couldn't think of the name of it. Thank you.
It's called Big Fun now because I think Big Feet was too close. So
Oh,
it's still hanging out down there. I guess it's not in fantastic shape, but there I think they also had the Race Rock out there in Vegas that they built another Bigfoot truck 4 with the 10-foot tires with the Super Duty body kind of hanging out the window. And if I remember right, I think there was a Barefoot truck that was built for one of the Race Rock locations that was built out of exhaust tubing to be lightweight because they were going to hang it somewhere. So this Race Rock thing was a pretty big deal back in the 90s.
Yeah, and I mean, I wish it was still around today. I wish motorsports were as popular as they were in the mid 90s and late 90s today. And honestly, you can't think of another restaurant where almost all forms of motorsports got along together and were in there together as well. Something that you really would never see nowadays, I don't think, is a restaurant like this with all of these things mixed into one.
Yeah, the collaborative effort just isn't there nowadays. Everybody wants their piece of the pie and wants their own exclusive thing. But I never got to go to one, as I said. I did get to go to a NASCAR cafe in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee one time. That was a lot of fun, but never got to go to Race Rock. It's something I guess I missed out on.
Yeah, you certainly did. Like I said, a lot of fun and cool monster truck videos as well. I wore that VHS out on the way back home, by the way. We drove to Florida. So for 17 hours, there was at least probably maybe 6 of those where that VHS was in our little VCR unit that we had in the back of the van.
Man, that had to be a fun ride home, though, right?
Oh, it was fun for me. My stepbrother wanted to shoot me, but it was fun for me.
So
we go into some stadium rough trucks here from Steel City. Interesting thing here, though, they're 3 at a time on this course.
Yeah, they weren't running kind of a mirrored elimination type race here in Pittsburgh. They ran the off-road course that the buggies and the quad wars were running, and they were running them like a NASCAR race, kind of side by side. They'd start them 3 at a time, and they did like a full lap or 2 around this track. And we go in, we see this final race here between, looks like I got 2 Jeeps and a Bronco, and we've got our guy here taking the win, a local guy.
Patrick McGuire. They said he was a local guy.
Yep, Pat McGuire. And I think they were pretty much all local guys here, and you could tell he's from Pittsburgh because he says, "I'm going to go out there. I'm going to put on a great show for the crowd."
We go from the stadium rough trucks to 1600cc buggies, which is something that you don't really ever see anywhere unless it's accompanying Pro 2 and Pro 4 trucks these days. But Jim Candle, excuse me, wins here. Some cool little highlights right here of these things. You would have never thought that they would all fit on that course.
It was a big track they had there at Three River Stadium. A lot of space to work with on the floor. I think they did these buggies down in Houston earlier in the winter as well as part of Monster Jam. They didn't do it a whole lot, as you said, but a couple different times trying it out. And part of this big mega show, that they did here in Pittsburgh, we're talking a full field at the time of monster trucks. You didn't really have any shows with more than 12 trucks. That was kind of the max for the most part. You've got the Quad Wars. You've got tough trucks. You've got the buggies. I think they did cycle wars there as well. So a full night of entertainment. I remember that show wasn't over till I think 11:30 at night. It was like a 4-hour show.
Really?
Yeah, it was incredible back then, and they really definitely put on all the stops here because, like I said, they had a lot of local involvement. Some of these segments as we're going in, if you got Jerry talking to somebody, a lot of those people were the local sponsors. As we go into that previous segment, you see the girls wearing a Hard Rock shirt. Hard Rock Pittsburgh's down there on the south side, and they were a sponsor of the event. I remember they had Hooters girls there. We talked about Y108, the radio station, earlier. I think Fox, our local Fox affiliate, sponsored the event. I mean, they had all kind of sponsorship money flowing into this event, and I guess that gave them budget to bring a couple extra acts in, which was really cool.
Yeah, and it's cool to see some different acts pop up at Monster Jam shows anyway. And this kind of harkened back to me whenever they started bringing in the mega trucks to do a bracket alongside the monster trucks as well back in the day. It was something different. It was something cool, something we'd never seen before.
I love seeing all the different stuff. And one of the things that always stuck out, I think 2004, they ran the hog pullers at a lot of the arena events. And if you got to see those, they were an interesting show as well.
That I have to go look up.
Yeah, they were kind of like pulling trikes, like motorcycle trikes, but they were built for pulling and they had their own sleds. And they were all, biker guys that were doing it. It was an interesting look, but they were really entertaining when it all came down to it.
Speaking of entertainment here, I know you're excited to talk about Pittsburgh Quad Wars right here.
Yeah. So we see Jolo, Team South versus Team North. May the best team win, with Jerry kind of hanging over his shoulder there, picking on him a little bit on the Jumbotron. And I remember it was, North versus South. And I remember being 7 years old and already knowing that Quad Wars was predetermined and fake. And I missed this accident that they show on TV. I remember the crowd going nuts, but we were out getting food and drink at this time because that was kind of our break in the action to go do what we needed to do out on the concourse. So maybe a bathroom break. I remember I was walking with my dad to or from the concession stand, and the crowd just goes absolutely nuts. And that's when Team South, I guess, took out one of the captains for Team North here. It says Hank DeHart kind of putting the wheel to Randy Dinkins here a little bit. And Team South gets the win, and they show that South's now leading 700 to 500 in the points. But in reality, this was the last event that they recorded, so I don't know how it was in reality. I don't remember how they sold it, other than I remember it was North versus South. It wasn't like Pennsylvania versus New Jersey or anything like that.
You think they made the names up for these guys too? Hank DeHart and Randy Dinkins.
Randy Dinkins is still out there racing.
Oh, really?
Quads,
okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm
now,
wrong.
PJ, I'm not sure what his true last name is. He's gone by PJ Hall, PJ Pyros, a couple other names, but he did Pittsburgh for years and years and years, and he always had a good group of guys coming in to do the show at the arena here in Pittsburgh, and does things all over the country. He was one of the main national guys back then that was kind of doing the big tour. Dan Allen, who would go up, through the ranks of management at SFX, he started off in Quad Wars as well. So a lot of these guys kind of got their start as this show part of the event. Bobby Parr, another one of them, would go on to drive the Suzuki truck. So
old Bobby Parr, I remember him. He was one of the guys I used to always love to talk to.
we have a lot of folks that kind of came in through these Quad Wars ranks, and it was a foot in the door for sure. And, they certainly always entertain, despite the fact that I always thought it kind of took away from the legitimacy of the rest of the event, being it's, kind of a work. But
Yeah,
hey,
I
people love
agree
it.
there. One name you didn't throw out there, and it might surprise some people, is actually George Belhan got his start doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, forgot about him too. So, it is what it is. It's entertainment. I like more now to watch the people in the crowd respond to this stuff than watching the Quad Wars, because I just laugh. Now it's hilarious to watch what these guys come up with, and I've seen some interesting stuff done over the years, and some things said on the PA, Mike, that you probably wouldn't want to repeat anywhere in public. That the people say just to get the fans riled up. It's not quite a PG show all the time.
Yeah, not all the time for Quad Wars, and I do remember that sometimes just to get a rile out of the crowd, they would kind of go necessarily quote unquote off script and rile that crowd up. But we move
Oh, for
on from
sure.
Quad Wars though, and we go into some freestyle highlights. We see a little clip of Survivor, Monster Patrol, Nightmare, Wild Thing, Carolina Crusher, and Bigfoot, all set to some really obnoxious music that you would probably hear at a club down the road. But man, I got to tell you, it was interesting, but I felt they could have shown a little bit more. It seems like each truck only got one little quick jump highlight.
Yeah, something that a lot of the folks nowadays may not recognize is back then, freestyle was done before the racing finals. So you just kind of send the trucks out one at a time, whoever wanted to go out. And by this point, 1997, pretty much all the trucks are going to go out and freestyle, at least most of them. The ones that are, kind of more well known. And we see Tom Mentz definitely putting on the show of the night at this point with the big jumps. And I remember him going nose to tail over the cars, crossways across the track. He was the only one that would do that. And of course, Tom doing the signature wing walk at the end of his run was always a big crowd pleaser. So they would do the freestyle, and then they kind of just left the track a complete mess here going into the finals. But it's the last race of the night, so you only got to make one more pass.
Yep, one more pass here between Carolina Crusher and Bigfoot, with the final dance set up between Carolina Crusher and local boy Eric Tack and Bigfoot. The Pittsburgh crowd was ready for the final here in the Steel City blowout. We get a little thing from Porter here. Says I've been trying to practice every race out here. I was getting a little bit better on my turn. If I can come out of that second jump real good, I stand a good chance of winning this thing. Then Eric Tack chimes in. He says we got a good truck. The crowd's pretty good. The track is biting a little bit in the corners. Whoever gets through the corner, he thinks is the guy that's going to win the race. He said Gary's going to give him a good race, and he should know he's already raced him once tonight.
For sure. And right before we go to Gary's interview here, they kind of do a crowd pan shot. I got to put myself over. I'm on TV. It's my TV debut. I'm in that crowd there. You can kind of see me looking down toward my mom, who's sitting down, probably messing with a camera or something. But it's that's my TV
So,
debut at
so
7 years old.
what you're telling me here is this that little span right there? That's the clip I need to post on Instagram and our MTR Facebook
We'll
page.
put a big red arrow pointing to my big mop of hair that I had when I was back that young. And I was there for
Can
sure
I
and
add a ding
loving
sound
every
effect?
second.
Can I add a ding sound effect for the arrow?
Yeah, for sure. You got to point out the superstars, right? I didn't get no SAG pay for it, unfortunately. I didn't have a speaking role, but we we head into the finals here. The cameras are kind of tight on each driver as we see them going in through the race. We close up shot of Bigfoot, and you could tell Tack's really pushing it hard over
Oh
this
yeah,
second
he
jump.
power slides that corner and gets a great launch out of the exit.
Hmm.
Gary actually says that he did not put his self-center rear steer on, and that's exactly probably what cost him a race right here, because when he comes out of the corner, the rear end is definitely not lined up with the front.
Yeah, I think that's the difference here. And Bigfoot knocks a pole down in the corner, but Porter's pole's already down when they get to the corner. So I'm not sure. Like I said, freestyle, they probably just let things go and just kind of stick to the boundaries as best as you can. And I'm not sure Porter looks like he may not get both front tires up that ramp anyway. So if you're going to call a penalty, it's probably going to end up even there by the end. And boy, still a stellar run out of Eric Tack in the Bigfoot 11 machine. And just getting big air from qualifying all the way through. He gets faster and faster and gets the truck a little bit lower through these later rounds of racing, figures the track out, and Bigfoot, your winner, the hometown hero, does it again.
Oh yeah, and one thing that really jumps out at me about this is the shot. They keep showing Meager's turn a couple of different times here. the way he pitches that thing into there is just he's hoping and praying it's going to stick almost.
Oh yeah, the dirt's kind of a little bit loose. It is dry, so I'm sure that Eric Tack probably think he could sling the truck in there a little bit, which the Bigfoot trucks aren't really known for. They're not known for carrying that sideways speed through the corner, but boy, he made it work on this night.
Yeah, he certainly did. Like you said, this truck's more designed for a Penda style event where you start on a 250-foot track, drive it straight down that track. Here, you get to see that these trucks are much more than capable of doing a turning course as well. And Tack puts it through its paces, gets a win here. He's your 1/900 pro race winner, as Scott Douglas says. Eric's interviewed. He said, "This is my hometown. I love coming out, showing everybody what I and the Big Blue Ford can do. Bob gives me awesome equipment. I can't say enough about him and the guys at the shop. If it wasn't for them, we couldn't come out here and play." Then Jerry says, "You set the standard on your first run tonight, catching some mega air." And you hear that in that Boston accent. He almost sounds like mega air.
He got mega air. And he really did in that qualifying run. He put a sky shot out there. The ramps are pretty steep, and they show that qualifying run there, and it's a pretty high jump for the time. He's got about 8-9 feet between the tires and the cars height wise, and it's very much a vertical hit. He barely clears the cars, but just takes a big nasty vertical shot, and it's a good thing the truck was set up well because he was able to go through the brackets and take the overall win for the night. And then we go to Jerry's interview with Gary Porter.
Yeah, and Jerry, he doesn't really mention the racing, which I found a little odd, but he says, I'm not going to say I didn't like you in the first place, but I'm starting to really become a big Carolina Crusher fan when you do the donuts. And Gary talks about, he says, "Hey, thanks," but then he goes right into it, says he's a little disappointed in his racing, said it was driver's error, forgot to hit his self-centering automatic rear steering switch there, and he said he waited for it to come a little straighter in the center of the car. I didn't notice it even come back at all, and Gary's still on the throttle going for that jump.
Yeah, he never really did get straightened up here, and it's unfortunate that he couldn't get the perfectly clean run in, but he gave it his best shot, just came up about, a truck length and a half short there at the finish, and that kind of wraps it up, the show itself here. We kind of go into a pitch for the following week, which is going to be the Charlotte Monster Truck Challenge class, where they actually ran for purse money, which was pretty cool, and that pretty much wraps up the ESPN2 broadcast of Inside Monster Jam from Pittsburgh.
Yeah, well, I got to ask you though, what'd you think of the Inside Monster Jam broadcast? You were at the actual event, so you could compare, from what you can remember of it, the actual event as well as the IMJ broadcast of it.
There's a couple things here. There's a couple factual errors in the show itself. Where the 10 truck versus 12 truck, couple other little things. But I love the format as a whole. I think they did a great job delivering a package to the people and getting eyes in front of Monster Jam. And I can remember the show must have been fairly effective because those shows that I was at live back then were the highest attended shows I've probably ever been to at the Civic Arena in Pittsburgh. And those couple years in Three Rivers were pretty well attended as well. So Monster Jam was pretty big, and the fact that they got back on TV now here for 1997 was certainly a plus. I'm going to give the television broadcast, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10, and the last stadium show I was at personally, 97, Pittsburgh Steel City Monster Jam, the show itself, easily a 14 out of 10.
14 out of 10. Okay, you're a little above the 10 scale there, but I'll allow it this one time. I was going to give it about a 7.5, 8 out of 10. One thing that really jumped out at me, one thing that I really liked about the show is we got to see some drivers that normally might not be highlighted. We got to see Chuck Jordan get a little bit of airtime. We got to see Charlie Pauken get quite a bit of airtime. And of course, you've got
we got our Thunder Nationals guys.
Your Thunder Nationals. Yeah, you get Thunder Nationals getting some airtime, and I completely blanked on the last truck there, and then remembered, Tony Farrell Wild Thing.
Yeah, yeah.
He gets a lot of airtime right here, and he gets to show off his cool entrance from Nashville. I like that a lot. I like the fact that, like I said at the beginning of this is like a giant around the USHRA segment.
Yeah, the format is great as a whole. I wish that it had been able to go on longer than 2 years, but we did get the Motor Madness show on TNN starting in 99. So, those 2 years of Inside Monster Jam were really cool. Then they kind of went to Inside Pace Motorsports the following year, which only ran for one season. Not a lot of people know about that show, hosted by Art Ekman. There's 1 or 2 episodes of that on YouTube if you do some digging. So it was a cool setup, and, the ESPN still giving monster trucks an outlet to get in front of the people is always a positive.
Yep, I agree with you 100%. That'll do it for Steel City here, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you all enjoyed it. I got to tell you, that was one of those things. I think we need to cover some more of these IMJ episodes. I think they're a much different and a much change of a pace here for the Retro Monster Truck Review. We hope you all enjoyed it. And until then, until next time, we'll see you again on the tracks across America.
See ya.